On today's podcast, we're talking about stepping back and looking at what opportunities exist to renovate your culture. Not fully tear it down or rebuild, although we know sometimes that's needed too, but instead, what areas need a revitalized design, build, and maintenance plan for the future? In what ways does your culture need to be renovated?
Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced the best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back, breathe in good oxygen, and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world.
Hey everybody, it's Jason and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast. Wherever you are and however you're coming to the podcast today, welcome back. So glad you are here. So glad you continue to make this a place that adds value to your life and work each week. If you are new to the podcast, welcome in. So glad you're here. We have 180 plus episodes now. So many great conversations with thought leaders from around the world that have joined me in this journey, but also micro pods about all kinds of different topics that we hope add value to your life and to your work. If you're one of the OGs that have been with us from the very beginning, welcome back. So glad this continues to add value because this podcast continues to grow and spread, and we're so glad that anybody is a part of it. So thank you for tuning in. My commitment to you, as always, will be this will be a place for you to step back, to think in your own week, in your month, time for you to think about your life, to think about the culture that you're creating with the people around you in work, in life, however you're thinking about it. And I hope this is a place that kind of breathes oxygen into you as you think about setting the temperature for your life and your work. So thank you for everybody that's been here, and hope you'll continue, if you're new, to dive in and listen to the old episodes. A lot of great stuff out there. Before we start, if you'll do me the quick favor and rate this podcast 5 stars, just stop for a second, hit that the 5-star button, leave a nice review on whatever platform you're listening to, your own authentic words. And anytime you share it on social media or with the people on your team, hey, if there's a topic or an episode that resonates with you, these are all the ways in which the podcast continues to spread, and we can amplify these messages around the world. So thanks for everybody that takes a moment to do that. So, from the beginning today, let's rinse and repeat some terminology to make sure we're on the same page for today's episode. You've heard me talk about this in the past, and certainly, again, this is a good rinse and repeat for anybody that's a loyal listener, at least to just frame up today's conversation, but that culture is dynamic. Culture is dynamic, which means it's always changing. It's changing moment by moment every single day, and it's not static. So it's not, if somebody that says, hey, we have a great culture, it doesn't mean that it's finished, that it's over. It's not static like that. It's always evolving. It's always growing. It's always changing. And it's shaped moment by moment every single day by the way we think, act, and interact. Think, act, and interact. Every person within a cultural ecosystem helps create the culture in a healthy or an unhealthy way. That's not out of judgment. That's just every single person within the cultural ecosystem is going to impact that culture either in the direction they want it to go or the direction they don't want to go. And that's going to be created by the way they think, act, and interact. So you may remember on a recent past episode, I talked about the idea or in culture shaping, the phrase cultural dissonance. Cultural dissonance is when our actions and behaviors do not align with the culture we say we want to create. And then there creates the dissonance because what we say we want and our behaviors don't line up. And so wherever you are in your own cultural journey as a team, as an organization, or as a single relationship, however you're thinking about that terminology today, culture is never finished. And there are always more opportunities to better shape the future you want to create. Sometimes your culture doesn't need a total tear down and a rebuild, if you will, although sometimes that is necessary to just, hey, we gotta start over, we gotta scratch, we need to really reboot our entire and build the entire culture. But more times than not, that's not the case. We don't need a total tear down or rebuild of the culture, but your culture just might need a renovation. So on today's podcast, we're talking about stepping back and looking at what opportunities exist to renovate your culture. Not fully tear it down or rebuild, although we know sometimes that's needed too, but instead, what areas need a revitalized design, build, and maintenance plan for the future? In what ways does your culture need to be renovated? But before we dive into today's topic, let's pause, take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
If you haven't done so already, we hope you'll visit Amazon or Amplify or jasonvbarger.com to check out Breathing Oxygen, my new book that is all about breathing good oxygen into ourselves and mindsets that fuel ourselves and the teams and the organizations around us. Positive, healthy thinking is as essential to great leadership and building a winning culture as the air we breathe. Leading yourself and a team of people has never been more complicated than it is today. As a leader, every move you make is either breathing life into your organization or slowly killing it. The atmosphere can easily turn toxic with negativity, blame, and doubt poisoning the culture. Just like every being on the planet needs good air to breathe, every organization needs leadership that breathes life into its people to sustain the energy required to complete its mission. Breathing Oxygen focuses on 6 key leadership mindsets that breathe life into any team: clarity, inclusivity, mental agility, grit, rest, and ownership. Join us, read, and share Breathing Oxygen.
Available now from Amplify Books on Amazon and jasonvbarger.com.
So again, culture is dynamic, which means it's always changing. It's not static. It's always evolving. It's always growing. It's always changing. And it's shaped moment by moment every single day by the way we think, act, and interact. And every single person within a cultural ecosystem helps create the culture, either in the direction you want or the direction you don't want, by the way they think, act, and interact. And not all cultures need a total tear down and a rebuild, but most just need to be revitalized through a renovation and a refreshed vision for what they want to create into the future. I like this metaphor, that author Kevin Oakes in his book called Culture Renovation used. I love this language. I think it's really good language to talk about renovating your culture rather than just rebuilding your culture, to renovate it. Because more times than not, we need a renovation, not a total tear down and a rebuild. And so this culture-shaping journey to think about what is it that we need to renovate. And I want to build off of that theme a little bit, which certainly is in great alignment with my thermostat cultures metaphor and this idea of getting clear on, well, what is that temperature we're trying to set? And then the actions and behaviors that are going to lead us intentionally into setting that temperature and creating the change that we want. So wherever you are in your cultural journey, every once in a while, it's time for us to step back and assess where you are and where you're hoping to go in the future. That's just a part of the change process and a part of leading and growing and stimulating progress within your culture. Your renovation oftentimes requires new eyes. We got to be able to look at the same thing that we've done in the past, but see it with new eyes. So we're going to quickly, on today's podcast, think about 3 phases of the renovation process to give you a framework to step back and assess your own vision for the future. And we're going to think about the design phase, the build phase, and the maintenance phase. So first, let's talk about the design phase, because these 3 different phases, if you're thinking about your own cultural renovation that may take place, first, hopefully you begin with the design phase, because all good renovations have blueprints. They have schematics. They lay out what alterations would be helpful. And part of the design phase is assessing. And if you remember when I talk about leading change and cultural change, and I've done a whole number of references on a number of podcasts, but there's a whole episode where I talk about the 6 A's of leading change. So if you aren't familiar with that, that's certainly the framework of my book, Thermostat Cultures. But also if you listen back to the past episode, then you'll see the way that this change process through the 6A, that part of the design phase is we need to begin by assessing, which is the first part of the change process in those 6 A's, is assessing what needs to be kept from the old design, the old culture, the old, frame of your culture within your team, your organization, or a relationship that you might be thinking about. What needs to be kept from the old and carried forward. We want to keep that. We want to keep that great core, the great bones, the great stuff from the past. And then we also need to identify what needs to be let go of. What do we need to get rid of? What maybe served its purpose in the past, but no longer serves our purpose in the future. And so another important element is being able to then not to assess these things, but then align with the people around us in our culture around what is most important for the culture in the future and what you want it to look like. And then, you think about so assessing, aligning. The third A is articulate. So in this design phase, can you articulate the future culture that you hope to build? Before we start putting pen to paper, what is it? And what will it look like in action and behavior? And can we describe what kind of future culture we want to create? And of course, then we get to the action part. What actions will be needed in order to build the newly renovated culture, and what habits, what processes, what procedures will be needed to help you maintain the renovation after the build. And then lastly, the 6A is anchor. Anchor that new vision. Anchoring it means what are we intentionally going to do over time to take care of this, which I'll talk about in the maintenance phase, so that this becomes the way that we live in the space and the way that we bring the best of the design actually to life. The 6 A's of change are layered certainly within this design phase. And so you might be thinking about it from your perspective, whatever culture you're thinking about, and hopefully you're giving yourself some time and space to step back and enter into that design phase to think about, hold on, let's do some assessment of where we've been in the past. Let's align ourselves around what is it we want in the future. Can we aspire? Can we paint that vision for that future culture that we want? Before we even start designing it, what is it we even want? And can we articulate it, what it might look like in action and behavior? Then we can start putting pen to paper and saying, okay, well, here would be actions and behaviors that we could frame up these walls, and that we could, if we could live in our thinking and our acting and interacting in this way, what would that look like? And then lastly, what's that anchoring going to look like for the future, which I'll get to just in a second. So that's the design phase. Then there's the build phase. So once we have a clear vision for that culture that we want to create and that renovation that we want to bring to life for our culture, then we've got to go build it. We got to begin to create it with the people around us. So within our culture. And so the build phase, often it's not just, hey, let's grab a hammer and let's start building it. Part of the building is we've got to begin to gather people around and communicate the vision to your people, and bringing them into alignment on the future vision is key before you even pick up a hammer. That's part of the building. Is you can't just pick up the hammers and start swinging. You got to first bring your people together into understanding the design and hopefully bringing them in to participate in the creation even of that, and the creation of the design and the ideas and the vision and the hopes into the finishes for this culture that will help there be greater buy-in for the renovation. So as you start to involve your people and, hey, here is the vision and here's what it might look like in action and behavior, and helping them to bring in their thoughts and their thinking, acting, and interacting into that, all of a sudden there creates a greater sense of buy-in for the renovation in general. Collaborating and involving your people intentionally in the process of constructing the walls. So again, metaphorically speaking, the walls, working on the actions and behaviors identified in order to move the culture forward. So what are those actions and behaviors that we think together, we as the culture, what do we want? And creating an atmosphere where all understand that they are ambassadors for this renovation. They are ambassadors for this culture. And all of us are actually going to be co-creators in the renovation. That's a key piece of this. Is it's not just one leader that then is building all of this. It's all of us. It's not just the leadership team. It's all of us are co-creators in the renovation. But we've got to know what it is that we're aiming to build, and then everyone can have a hammer and a nail. Everyone can paint a wall. Everybody can fasten the new handles on the drawers or whatever is part of this renovation to revitalize the space. But everyone will be a co-creator once we're clear on what that design is and what it is we're trying to create. All of us will be a part of that build phase to help create the actions and behaviors that we want to exist in the culture. And then lastly is the maintenance phase. The maintenance phase is once we feel like we've designed it and we've gone to the process to be building of the renovation, is we recognize that once the building is, quote unquote, built, that the culture isn't finished. And this is where some of this renovation idea, I think, maybe loses a little bit of the metaphor, because we're going to have to maintain it, but I don't think it's even strong enough. Oftentimes with spaces that we renovate, there is maintenance, of course, that always comes with it, but it's easier to walk away and then get our eyes on something else that we want to build. Part of culture shaping is that it never stops. So we've got to actually expand even our thinking about this maintenance phase, because once the culture is designed and built, it must be maintained. And so we're mixing metaphors here, but again, my language comes into this, that once we set the temperature for what we want, then this is the breathing oxygen into from my most recent book. Then we've got to breathe oxygen into it to keep it going. And so part of that maintenance phase of the renovation, again, we're mixing metaphors here, but hopefully you're connecting the dots of each of these, is that this is the maintenance phase. So same with the renovation metaphor. Once the build has been put into place, we can't just build it and then walk away and think it will hold up on its own. We're going to have to clean it. We're going to have to love it. We're going to have to take care of it. We're going to have to fix the little bumps and dents along the way. And we're going to have to teach other leaders and builders to help take care of it for the future. Culture doesn't get renovated overnight, of course, but the process begins as you get more clear with your people on the areas where progress is needed and possible. And so part of the maintenance phase is also teaching your people how to live in the space and how to maximize the space and bring it to life, so that not just culture isn't just what we do, it's how we do it. And so the actions and behaviors and how we're going to live in this space together is what, again, from a team organizational standpoint, is what's going to connect us to our performance on an everyday basis. So part of today is to get you thinking about the design phase, the build phase, and then the maintenance phase, and to be thinking about where does your culture need a renovation next. And certainly, as you dive into this, if I can be helpful in that conversation with your team or organization, you know where to find me. Let's begin to think about what is that renovation that may be needed. So, some questions for you to ponder for today's episode. Where is your culture in need of a renovation? Where is your culture in need of a renovation? What new design would be helpful to revitalize your culture? What intentional building plan will help you practice the actions and behaviors that you have identified for the culture you want to create into the future? And what commitments are you willing to make to maintain the culture moving forward for the next years, plural? Not just 1 year, but years in the future. How are you going to be committed to maintaining this renovation and this culture moving forward?
So I hope today's episode got you thinking in many new ways. If a deeper dive into any of the topics that we've been talking about in the past are interesting to you, please reach out to us at info@jasonvbarger.com, info@jasonvbarger.com, and let us know your thoughts. We'll continue to design content to help meet you where you are. Lastly, I invite you to go back and listen to a number of the past episodes, and hopefully they add value to you and your journey and your leader, as a leader, or the culture that you're trying to create. Cheers to the path ahead for all of us, and remember that the future of leadership is you, is me, is us. We need to get clear on the temperature we hope to set, or the renovation that we hope to set, and then be courageous and committed to breathing oxygen into the mindsets and the actions that will sustain our path forward. Step back, remember, be a thermostat, and breathe good oxygen. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using, and share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to you and your organization, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com, jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we are all ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.